Welcome to Ahead of the Curve podcast.
Okay, now I've lost this. There you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Welcome to Ahead of the Curve podcast. Today, I have with me a figure in economics who bears a historical distinction. He is an extremely discerning and a dissenting voice against the shackles of economic orthodoxy. He's a key to figure out how all of the great economists that we discuss about, that we revere, he's a key to figuring out how their minds functioned, how they acted, their interpersonal relationships, and other things, and carries with him a generational understanding of the happenings of the discipline and a wealth of knowledge and experiences constituted by the discipline. He has authored several books of great consequence, like The Predator State, Inequality and Instability, and he's currently a professor at the LBJ School of Public Policy. And he is, in the truest sense of the term, economics royalty. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. James K. Galbraith. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I mean,
Pl-
I just want to say right off the bat that this feels surreal to me. I mean, this feels as though I'm talking to one of the demigods in economics, in a manner of speaking.
Oh,
Yeah.
let's just say I've had the misfortune of being stuck with this discipline for a very long time. So,
Uh, but I mean, it's unreal. I mean, you must have. I mean, first off, because you're the son of the great Dr. John K. Galbraith. I mean, it's you would have come across so many economists, so many people of different generations, different
yeah, yeah. This
levels.
this this is part of a very mixed blessing of my existence, which is that I was exposed at a very through all my childhood and adolescence
Yes.
to the most interesting people in the profession at the time. And they were an exceedingly interesting, diverse, intellectually contentious,
Yeah.
original group.
Yes.
I studied in both Cambridges and a little later for a while in New Haven. So
Yeah.
I knew people who had been close associates of Keynes. I knew people like Vasily Leontiev, Albert Hirschman,
Okay.
all of these. And so I had a completely false view of the economics profession, as considering it to be much more significant
Yes.
than it certainly, well, was significant at the time, but much more significant than it has proven to be in the last, let's just say,
Yes.
50 years. And so now I'm an aging survivor of a long gone
A living
intellectual
legend.
tradition.
A living legend.
Yeah, but that's a nice way of putting it. I appreciate that.
No, but I mean, since an early age, I mean, so how did your like first interaction with the discipline of economics start? I mean, was it from a very young age? I mean, as great sportsmen put their sons and daughters into that sport and they train them at a very early
No,
age.
no, 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 not at all. My father's tradition was, of course, uh, pragmatic and institutionalist. If he
Yeah.
had, you know, intellectual antecedents, Thorstein Veblen would have certainly been a crucial one.
Yes.
Keynes as well, but he was much more of a he grew up on a farm and he had managed an industrial economy.
Yes.
He was a figure of practical self-education to a very, very large extent, which gave him a great deal of intellectual independence, which he maintained all through his entire life. And in our family, I think that the general expectation of, and it wasn't, I mean, I wouldn't, that's a strong word, but the sense I had was that the right profession to go into if you wanted to play a role in the larger life of the society was not economics at all, but
No.
law.
Yeah.
And that's my oldest brother became a lawyer, and so that when I decided to go into to pursue graduate study in economics, I didn't
Yes.
major in it as an undergraduate. I think my parents were they were not unhappy, but they were a little bit surprised,
Okay.
a little bit skeptical because they saw as I saw that the profession was in a state of already in a state of decline.
Okay.
But at the time, it was very important. I was very interested in playing in a policy role, and I had access to that. And you couldn't really play a role in policy in the economic sphere unless you had the appropriate credential. So I went ahead and got it.
But you were the son of the one of the he was in a sense the
Sure.
Jawaharlal Nehru of economics. I mean, he was a monolithic figure, right? So I mean that added to the
Yeah, that was another disadvantage of growing up in this household. Is you have a father that you can't quite
who's
catch up to.
yes.
So most teenagers of my generation had experience of rebelling against their parents' influence, and that
Yeah.
experience largely escapes me. It was always a step ahead. Uh,
Nice, but you've never had any
uh,
debates with him on any economic topics? Any? I mean, what was he like though? I mean,
I'll tell a little story of that may amuse your listeners. Some years ago, I ran into a friend of mine by the name of Frank Roosevelt, and he was the grandson of the president,
okay.
and a very nice man who was a
Yeah.
professor of economics in New York, upstate New York, I think, and suburban New York. And he was at an event, and he said to me in a somber way, "We carry a terrible burden with our names."
Yes.
And I said, "Frank,
Yeah.
what the?" And excuse me, I will not repeat the word, but what the are you talking about? And he was a little shocked.
Yes.
Uh, and I said, "It's not Reagan. It's not Bush." Ah, he said, "You have a point. I feel better already."
Wow.
Anyway, uh,
But yeah, I mean, it's no, I'm just having goosebumps just thinking about this. I mean, as a fan of economics, I mean, these are the moments you're actually looking for, you're craving that you're sort of rendered speechless for. But yes, but before we start with your books, how was the economics education and the fraternity you had surrounded yourself with at my age as a young undergraduate student in the 70s? Uh, how was that movement like in the with the Cambridge Capital controversy with lots of conflicting opinions and all that?
I spent 1 year at the University of Cambridge, and the controversies were still very much alive. John Robinson was still uh, uh, occasionally lecturing. Calder was coming up and lecturing on the weekends. I had extremely good tutor, Adrian Wood. So I got thoroughly immersed in all of this. I do remember an incident. The apostle of the general equilibrium neoclassical approach at Cambridge at that time was Frank Hahn.
Yes, on the notion of equilibrium, if I remember rightly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I I attended Hahn's lectures, and a few weeks in, he switched from consumption to production, and there was a diagram with a
Yes.
curve on an isoquant on the might have even labeled isoquant on the blackboard. And there was a woman I had not seen before sitting in the front row wearing a blue Peruvian poncho and with a shock of extremely white hair.
Wow.
And as Hans started to speak, she said, "Excuse me, what are on the axes?"
Okay.
And Hans stormed to the edge of the stage and looked at her and said, "Joan, I told you you mustn't intervene. And if you don't shut up, I'm going to have to ask you to leave."
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, all the students were utterly shocked and terrified. He stormed across the stage, looked out at the students, and said, "Could someone please tell Mrs. Robinson what are on the axes?" This terrified silence. So he stormed back to the blackboard and took out a piece of chalk and wrote X sub 1, X sub 2, and turned around and said, "Factors of production." So he avoided, of course, saying capital. That was the end of that exchange. I went up to Joan Robinson after the lecture as she was walking out and introduced myself, and she took me to lunch. So that was an early introduction to the intellectual life of Cambridge at that time. But what's happened at Cambridge since then has really been very sad. And there's a very good book by Ashwini Saeed that describes how the Cambridge Economics Department was dismantled and turned into,
what is now known as the dominant force. Yeah.
A completely unexceptional place that I don't think any ambitious, economist would go out of their way to attend. Anyway,
Yes. Yes. So I mean, historically, I think I've been following your work for some time now. I mean, ever since I got into the discipline of economics as a subject of study, you've written largely on inequality, on different aspects of it, in different conditions and all of that. But this specific, your recent outing has to do with an entirely different way of looking at economics. Sort of, you're basing it off of biophysical processes. And you're basing it off of, and you're trying to find the roots of various sort of economic concepts. So how did that transition, and what led to this what led to the inception?
Now that's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
And it is less of a transition than you might imagine. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got into the inequality question very early, long before it was fashionable. In fact, it was very unfashionable until sometime in the 1990s, late 1990s or early 2000s. And my discovery on beginning to look at it was just how bad the data were. That we really couldn't say anything with any great confidence based upon the surveys that had been taken, the kinds of hypothesis testing that was going on. It was all very unpersuasive. So it was necessary to think about how you would get a better information set on which you could base a research program and a set of arguments. And so we set out on that, and we had a very good idea, which was that inequality measures are, in some sense, inequality is in some sense embedded in all kinds of data. And if you organize the data, you take the data and the calculations are extremely simple, but the data are widely available. It's not individual level, and therefore it's not, let's say, attuned to the sensitivities of the neoclassical economist.
Yes,
it's about inequality across sectors, across regions, across any kind of categorical structure on which data might be collected, and you learn an awful lot about what has happened within countries and across countries this way. And so it just expanded organically into a research program, basically carried out by my students. And then we prepared a number of great many articles, a number of books that reported on the results. And what we, first of all, interestingly enough, the measures that we're using are entropy-based measures. They're all very closely related to Claude Shannon's theory of, say what? The tile statistic. Yeah, the tile statistic is Tile basically developed it after having read Shannon's on information theory. So we're looking at something which was methodologically not at all different from what developed later in my encounters and work with Jing Chen. And it's also about it's looking at the system as an organic whole. So rather than thinking about the system as the aggregation of autonomous, freely floating, vibrating individual
moving,
particles,
yeah.
we're looking at the relationships between between major sectors and major and regions and so forth, and how things develop over time. And that stretches you back to Kuznets. It stretches you back to the institutional frameworks of earlier economic scholarship. So, in some sense, everything kind of flowed together. And the good fortune I had to encounter Jing Chen was, I think, came out of that he saw in what we were doing something that was sympathetic to his own ideas, and he sent me a message saying, here's an article that I think you might be interested in. I'd never heard of him, and I read it and wrote back, and we became correspondents and friends and co-authors, and ultimately produced this book, which is, I have to say, largely his thinking, my writing, in a complementarity. But I find myself very content to have helped develop a framework which is so consistent with my thinking, with my father's thinking, with Keynes, with Veblen, with Schumpeter. So with E.H. Chamberlain actually as well. Monopolistic competition. So there's a whole tradition here that we are embedded in. And if anything, we could have written a good deal more, made a more substantial link in the book to these antitheses. But we do, I think, try to make pretty clear that we're not introducing something that's, in some sense, brand new. What we're trying to do is to say that we have to recognize that all of natural science moved in the 19th century to an understanding of that the second law of thermodynamics was a fundamental force of nature, and since it is a fundamental force, it has to apply to economics as well as everything else. But then you look for it in the conventional textbooks, and you find it's not there. That it's simply the way of thinking hasn't advanced past the late 18th century. And that was the time of when
Marshall.
Marshall's a throwback already. But if you think about Smith, Francois Quesnay, you think about where did Quesnay get his ideas? He got them from China. So it goes back to a long period of classical philosophy, which, I'm not saying that's without merit, but the 19th century pushed the world into an entirely different understanding of what the basic forces are.
Indeed. So I think, I was terribly interested in this book because I think this was a deviation from the usual genres that you tinker with. But apart from that, something that was very prominent to me while I was reading the book, and the thing that sort of got me hooked onto this book was to understand where ideas came from, ideas in economics, tools in economics, and things like that. So I've noticed that a lot of the tools and the concepts in economics, come from science, come from engineering, come from physics. Lots of engineers turned economists. Lots of physicists turned economists. So where did the idea of equilibrium originate from? Like, why do we have this idea of equilibrium as something to sort of understand our economic processes?
I would place origins are a murky matter, but I would place the origin of the equilibrium concept as understood in mainstream economics, I would place it in classical Chinese philosophy. And that this is yin and yang. It's the balance of things. It's about this. And this is a philosophy which is consistent with the idea of a very long-standing, indeed permanent state of harmony of society under the administration of an imperial court. And this was, of course, it was not unappealing to the court of Louis XV in France, where Quesnay was the court physician. And so you'll say, okay, now, unfortunately, 1789, that image of the world was rather badly disturbed by the French Revolution. And then onwards to the Industrial Revolution, onwards to Marx's analysis, onwards to Darwin in 1859, onwards to now when you come to a figure like Thorstein Veblen at the end of the 19th century, he's explicitly taking into what was then the modern scientific vision. Keynes. Something I wrote about many years ago now. If you look at Keynes's general theory, what he is keying off of is Einstein. First of all, the title, the general theory of what?
Of what?
Yeah. Right? Yeah. In 1936, if you write the general theory of, etc., employment, interest, and money, people are going to think relativity. And Keynes understood this extremely well. And in the second chapter of the general theory, he writes, the classical economists are like Euclidean geometers in a non-Euclidean world, whose only recourse upon observing that lines apparently parallel or intersecting is to rebuke them for the unfortunate collisions that are occurring. It's right there. Now, where is that non-Euclidean geometry, non-Euclidean world come from? It's clearly Einstein. It's clearly Einstein. So I did a little bit of searching for references to Einstein and Keynes, and discovered that in fact they'd met in 1926 when Keynes went to Berlin, and Keynes had written about Einstein, and in his little essay on Einstein, he quotes the opening passages of the general and special theory. Einstein talks about Euclidean geometry. So it's clear that Keynes's vision, monetary production, is taking something that was space and time, production, space, time is money, and bringing them together in an Einsteinian framework. That's what he thought. That's what he thought he was doing, and he was doing it. Yeah. So again, the effort to bring modern science into economics has been an ongoing project. And what happened with the neoclassicals, with Samuelson in particular, was just a concerted effort to draw the line at entropy, which we talk about in the book. Samuelson was just allergic to this idea. And it wasn't that he didn't understand the concept. It's that I think he understood how inconsistent it was with the entire framework, general equilibrium. And so you could have one or the other, but not both. And a result of this is that the mainstream economics has basically walled itself off from an understanding of life processes. And to the extent that that's has begun to be acknowledged as really unsatisfactory. Then which, I mean, mainstream economists are obviously aware of the fact that it's really hard to have a theory of a capitalist economy in which financial crises can't occur. It's obvious that to most people that not only can but do. And when anything that disturbs the system is an exogenous shock, and there's no intrinsic instability, and Minsky would never lived, and so forth. These are people are nervous about this. Well, what's the reaction? Is basically not to talk to anybody, outside their own profession, outside their own limits.
Just
And they don't,
Yeah.
it's extremely insular group
Yes.
of people resistant to this kind of thing. That creates a lot of, let's say, intentional barriers to communication.
Indeed. So I mean, so with reference to the book, a couple of questions, because you've also touched upon inequality in this book. I think there was a certain aspect of it which was, in my opinion, very unconventional and it was very provocative. In a sense, but it opens up a lot of different ideas. You say that inequality is necessary, but there is a necessary rate of inequality which we must abide by. There's a necessary order.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And this again gets to an understanding of the linkage between these two phases of my work, because the measurement of inequality. Well, it is simply not the case that lower is always better.
Right.
Indeed. I mean, there's this. It is not the case that 0 is the right number for your blood pressure. Yes. So when you think about this in a dynamic context, which is suitable to an evolutionary frame of mind, what you understand is this is a question of homeostasis. That there's a range which is reasonably healthy.
Yes.
And there are, and when the numbers start changing, that's symptomatic of something. And the rise of inequality, and particularly past a better point, I think past a certain point, is very analogous to the rise of body temperature or blood pressure. Yes. It's a sign that you're running into trouble. Now, inequality is necessary. Yes. Explain to me, sir, why you went to college. Well, you went to college to get ahead. Of course. Of course. Ahead of who? What? Ahead of people who didn't go to college. Why did you, did you sign up for this miserable profession of economist? Because it has a certain career prospect for you, presumably. Yeah. And, certainly when I did it, that's what I tell my students. My students were all, idealistic, and they presumably take my class on inequality. They come in largely, they're opposed to it. And I say, why are you here? You're in graduate school. What do you think you're doing? Of course, you're working in an unequal system. So the problem is not inequality as such; it's how much.
Yes.
And for that, you need to have measurement that is reasonably reliable. And that was, of course, another place where the whole economics profession has fallen down in the most miserable way. But it is possible to greatly improve, because, as I said, there's lots of economic data, and it provides a reasonably good guide to what's going on in the world. Anyway, leaving that aside, they just bringing it over into the context of this book. The parallels are everywhere. We talk about them. You build it, and it puts you in mind of this basic tension of reality. Indeed. You build a bigger dam, you can get more power out of it.
Yes.
A dam failure is that much more catastrophic.
Yes.
You build a hotter engine, you get more. It's more efficient, but it also takes more material to keep it. So that it functions, and breakdowns are costlier and more dangerous, and on and on and on. So every aspect of this is the progress of human society toward more efficiency, better integration, and that's absolutely true in the financial sphere as well. Leads you to a position of greater vulnerability and fragility. This is why. The great animals of the wild are necessarily not very numerous and often quite endangered.
Yes.
And why when the dinosaurs went extinct, all the big ones went out, but the small ones
Or
are
still around.
around.
Yeah.
Still around. They're called birds.
Birds. And
They're
lizards
around
and
in the
geckos.
millions. Right.
Yeah. And
So
yeah.
this is the sort of a very basic fact of existence, which of course try and find it in mainstream economics. So you're
Indeed.
looking at something, something where you get just a qualitative, by thinking this through in terms that are consistent with the larger understanding of the world, physical, biological processes. You get a qualitative understanding of the economic problem.
True. I think I must make a confession. This is the first time I've actually chanced upon this opinion. I don't think I've ever encountered this opinion. I mean, this take from anyone else, and I find this to be, in a sense, somewhat realistic. That's just my observation to how things would ideally function.
It is an effort to bring economic reasoning into contact with the real world. And I'll have to say, that the mathematics in the book, which are really quite simple and straightforward. One equation basically that deals with the theory of value, and another one which deals with the problem of the production decision. So two very fundamental questions, more fundamental than exchange, because you can't exchange anything unless you've produced it. And both of them can be, let's say, you can put parameters on into those equations and calculate out what you think they're telling you. And they give, that's obviously not precise, but they give quite reasonable indications of how things will turn out. So our notion of value is a scarcity notion.
Yes.
And the scarcity is, how is scarcity defined? It's defined as the probability that a given product, I won't say commodity because product is a more precise word, that a given product is already held by a certain scale of market that's accessible to it. So one can think about, I don't know, there's a smartphone of certain, and smartphones are continually being revamped with new numbers and new technologies.
While the core functions remain the same.
And the question then is, what's the market penetration of those? How many have you sold relative to what you think you can sell?
Yes.
And the rarer these things are, the more valuable. Once everybody has them, they're available in the secondhand market for a very modest price. And that's the case for practically everything. Everything that's produced, and a lot of things that are simply sitting out there. How many old masters are there? Well, there are not very many. And their price in the asset market reflects this. It works pretty well for the valuation of companies. There's the new companies like NVIDIA that have all the market capitalization, and companies which are much larger and much more established, automobile companies. Their market capitalization is much less because the products they produce are not scarce. So that's the two things that determine scarcity, or the degree of novelty in the product, and the degree of monopoly in the production. As more producers come in to flood a market with a similar product, the value of the product is going to go down. So it's in contrast with supply and demand theory. It's a dynamic process. It's something which changes all the time as the market conditions change, as the degree of scarcity changes. And that then gives you something which is practically operational. I'm not saying it's perfect, because it was really very simple, a simplification of a complex system, but it's operational.
Just one small thing. So the meeting's going to end in 10 seconds. I'll be sending you the link.
Hold on. Okay, you want to just send me another link?
Yeah, I'll send another link to you through email. Just give me 1 second.